You know, Behnam, we saw yesterday world leaders Emmanuel Macron, Angela Merkel, Boris Johnson. They actually joined the U.S. in blaming Iran for the attacks on Saudi oil fields. Does that reinforce the president's stance on Iran? Are they backing what he has to say?
Well, absolutely, and that is a historic step. You know, the European nations have more, unfortunately, since May 8, 2019, which is when the U.S. left the JCPOA nuclear deal. Unfortunately, they had been tacking closer towards Tehran, the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism, than Washington. This is a pretty significant first step. I think the administration would like to see these three European nations, known as the E3, to move the EU to do more on the Iran file, to do Iran sanctions, to work on Iran's regional missile and military issues. But this is a positive step, but just up to these three European capitals now to turn this rhetoric into reality and help bridge this transatlantic gap that I think Iran, until very recently, has been exploiting.
You know, there are some European countries that have been so supportive of Iran, Behnam. Are there any allies for Iran at the United Nations?
Well, Iran has long tried to marshal members of the non-aligned movement. It's long tried to play up the differences between President Trump and other presidents here in the States. It's also tried to play up, of course, the U.S. penchant or preference for unilateralism over multilateralism and reframing America as opposed to Iran as the international pariah. These things actually have not been sufficient to insulate the regime from tough sanctions. And also, this is the way that the regime has likely been looking to win diplomatically against the U.S. while it's been losing economically. And even, you could say, in the region, Iran is having to lash out because it feels like it's in a corner.
Paula, do folks at the Treasury Department at the White House believe that these sanctions on Iran are working?
They do. The president has repeatedly said, as Treasury Secretary has said, that the maximum pressure campaign they believe is working. But that's not what our allies believe. And their conduct recently suggests that this has not exactly had a deterrent effect. But it does appear that they've pretty much issued all the sanctions that they could that would actually have an impact. But if you ask them, yes, they would say maximum pressure has worked.
So, Behnam, should the bottom line be the president should keep up the pressure, the highest level of sanctions on Iran at this point? How do they move forward?
Absolutely, and just with immense respect to Paula, I don't think we're anywhere near maxing out our sanctions with respect to Iran. There are still sectors of the Iranian economy that are owned or controlled by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. This is really that nasty, hardened group of military men whose veterans are across Iran's politics and society currently. They are the one really in charge of this foreign and security policy. So there is still much more left to sanction, you could say. There's the construction sector, the rest of the petrochemical sector. There's entities that help Iran bring in revenue illicitly, of course. There's exposing Iran's hand when it comes to proliferation networks, procurement networks, and of course there's going after Iran's myriad proxies in the region, as well as its partners and the installations that it's building across the Middle East and the Gulf.